I still remember the sound of my mother-in-law's heels clicking against our wooden floor as she approached my husband, Mike, in the dining room. It was filled with the aroma of the lasagna I had spent hours preparing, hoping to finally win her approval. My stomach was churning. Morning sickness was brutal. I was barely 6 weeks pregnant, but I hadn't told anyone yet. That's when everything changed. Jane, my mother-in-law, placed her hand on Mike's shoulder and leaned in to whisper something in his ear. I watched his face go from relaxed to completely angry in a matter of seconds. The warm brown eyes I had fallen in love with turned cold as he looked at me. "Is this true?" he demanded, standing up so fast that the chair scraped against the floor. "Have you been lying to me?" Before I could respond, his hand came out of nowhere. The slap was so hard it knocked me off balance. I stumbled and braced myself against the wall. My cheek burned, and the room started to spin as tears filled my eyes. That's when it happened, the wave I had been holding back all evening. Right there, in front of them both, I vomited. Mike took a step back, startled. He looked disgusted, but then he froze, noticing something peculiar in my purse, which had spilled open on the floor. A positive pregnancy test had slid out. His face drained of color. "Sarah, are you?" He couldn't finish the sentence. I touched my sore cheek as tears streamed down my face. "Yes," I whispered. "I'm pregnant. I was going to tell you tonight. That's why I made your favorite dinner." The silence in the room was deafening. Mike looked at the pregnancy test, then at his hand, the same hand he had just used to hit his pregnant wife. Janet stood there immobile. Her perfectly painted red lips were pressed into a thin line, but in her eyes I could see the surprise. "Oh my God," Mike whispered, his voice shaky. He reached out to me, but I flinched away from him, from the man who had promised to love and protect me. He had hit me while I carried his child in my womb. In that moment, watching my husband grapple with the horror of what he had done, I realized our lives would never be the same. The secret I had wanted to share with Joy had come out in the worst possible way. Now I had to decide if I could ever trust him again, if I could forgive him, and most importantly, if I could risk staying with someone who could hurt me and our baby. The sound of a door opening made us all jump. Emma, our neighbor, stood in the doorway, concern etched on her face. "I heard a scream," she said, taking in the scene. My red cheek, Mike's rigid posture, Jane with her erect figure and haughty demeanor. Jane tried to smooth things over. "Everything's fine," she said coldly. But it wasn't. Nothing was fine, and I knew it wouldn't be for a long time. I remember the day I met Mike as if it were yesterday. It was a Friday afternoon at Carter's coffee shop in downtown Austin. I was grading papers. Being a third-grade teacher means your weekends start with a mountain of math worksheets and creative writing assignments. Suddenly, he accidentally spilled his coffee all over my students' work. His frantic attempts to save the papers made me laugh. "I promise I'm not usually this clumsy," he said desperately, blotting the papers with napkins. "Please let me buy you a coffee. Or maybe dinner." That's how it all started, simple, sweet, and completely perfect. Mike was everything I had ever dreamed of. He was successful but humble, funny but responsible, and he looked at me like I was the most fascinating person he had ever met. Our first year of marriage was beautiful. We bought a small house with a tiny backyard, talked about having kids someday, and spent our weekends dreaming about our future. Then Janet moved in with us. "It's just temporary, honey," Mike assured me. "Mom's going through a rough time with the divorce and needs support." I wanted to be understanding. I tried. But Janet had a way of making me feel insignificant in my own home. Nothing I did was ever good enough. The house was never clean enough, my cooking didn't meet her standards, and apparently neither did I. "You don't take good enough care of my precious son. Mike works so hard," Janet would say as she watched me pack his lunch. "He needs more protein than that." After Janet moved in, the changes in Mike were subtle at first. He started criticizing things that had never been an issue before. The way I folded his shirts, the food I cooked, even how much time I spent talking on the phone with my sister. Every criticism seemed to come after those private, whispered conversations he had with his mom. Things got worse when I found out I was pregnant 3 weeks ago. I should have been overjoyed, but instead I was terrified. I hid my morning sickness, making excuses to go to the bathroom at school. I kept crackers in my desk drawer and blamed my fatigue on end-of-semester stress. I wanted to tell Mike first, To have a moment of joy just for us before Janet barged in with her opinions on how I should handle my pregnancy. The night of the slap, I had planned everything perfectly. I made Mike's favorite lasagna, his preferred wine, though I wasn't going to drink any, and even bought a tiny onesie to surprise him. But Janet insisted on coming over for dinner. Family dinners are important, she'd said, inviting herself. I was in the kitchen layering pasta sheets into the lasagna when I overheard Janet on the phone. She's hiding something, I know it. I've seen her running to the bathroom at odd hours. She's probably having an affair. Mike deserves better than that tramp. My hand shook as I slid the lasagna into the oven. An affair. That's what she whispered to Mike during dinner. Why did he jump to believe the worst of me? Now, standing in our dining room with Emma witnessing the aftermath of what had just happened, I felt the weight of it all. Every wrong assumption, every whispered lie, every moment I had stayed silent just to keep the peace. Instinctively, my hand moved to my belly. The baby inside me deserved better than this. I deserved better than this. Sarah, Mike said, stepping closer to me again, his voice cracking. Please let me explain. But Emma had already put her arm around my shoulders. She's coming with me, she said firmly. And you better not try to stop her. As Emma led me out of the house, I heard Janet's voice behind us. Mike dear, she's hysterical. You know how women get in their condition. The door closed behind us, shutting out Janet's words, but the damage was already done. My perfect life had shattered in a single night, and I had no idea how to pick up the pieces. The next few days at Emma's house were a blur of tears, nausea, and endless calls from Mike, all of which I let go to voicemail. Emma, bless her soul, took care of everything. She went to my house to collect my clothes, called the school to request my sick days, and held my hair while I dealt with morning sickness. Your house isn't a home anymore, Sarah, Emma said one morning as she pushed a mug of ginger tea toward me. We were sitting at her kitchen table. I've seen how things have been getting worse over the past few months. I held the warm mug in my hands, remembering how everything had changed since Janet moved in. At first, it was small things. Reorganizing my kitchen while I was at work, saying she just wanted to help. Making comments about my weight, saying she was worried about my health. But what hurt the most was her influence on Mike. Remember last month? Emma asked gently. When Mike skipped your sister's wedding because Janet said she felt too anxious to be left alone? Ah yes. I felt that familiar pang of hurt in my chest. He hadn't even questioned it. He just called my sister and made excuses, all while I was silently seething at his back. The constant calls and texts from Mike were like a broken record. I'm so sorry. Please come home. I'll fix it. I never meant to hurt you. But interspersed between those messages were ones from Janet. You're tearing this family apart. Mike's devastated by your dramatics. A good wife would come home and work things out. A week after the incident, I had my first prenatal appointment. Emma came with me, holding my hand as the doctor confirmed I was 6 weeks pregnant. The sound of my baby's heartbeat filled the room, and thick, steady tears started falling down my cheeks. My cheeks were full of tears, a mixture of joy and sorrow. Mike should have been here for this moment. Would I ever be able to share these moments with him and Lily together? Do you want me to record it? Emma whispered. I nodded, unable to speak. That night, I sat on the guest bed at Emma's house staring at my phone. I had promised myself I wouldn't contact Mike, but hearing our baby's heartbeat changed something within me. With trembling fingers, I texted him the recording and a simple message. Your son's heartbeat. His response was immediate. Please, can we talk in person? Without Mom. I looked at my reflection in the bedroom mirror. The bruise on my cheek had started to fade, now a yellowish-green hue, but the fear in my eyes was still there, fresh. Could I face him? Should I? My phone vibrated again. This time it was Janet. How dare you send him that without discussing it with me first? I'm his mother. I should be involved in these decisions. Something inside me snapped. 3 years of staying silent, of trying to please her, of watching my husband slowly become her puppet, it all overflowed. I typed a response I had been holding back for far too long. You are not involved in decisions about my baby. You never have been. You never will be. I blocked her number before she could respond. Minutes later, Mike called. This time I answered. Janet went too far, he said before I could even speak. His voice was urgent, filled with remorse. I overheard her on the phone with her friends, bragging about how she saved me from your supposed affair. Sarah, she made it all up. God, I believed her. I hit you because I trusted her lies. His voice broke, and I could hear him crying on the other end of the line. I need you to choose, Mike, I said, my voice stronger than I actually felt. Your mom moves out or I don't come back. And if I don't come back, I'll talk to a lawyer about full custody. I'm not raising our child in a home with violence. The silence on the other end of the line was so long I thought he'd hung up. Finally he spoke. Could you meet me tomorrow at Carter's where we first met? Mom won't be there, I promise. I just need to see you. I stared at my still flat butt carrying our future stomach. Okay, I whispered. Tomorrow at 2. But Mike, if she shows up, this is over. Forever. She won't, he said firmly. I choose you, Sarah. I should have always chosen you. I hung up, but I wasn't sure if I believed him. For the sake of our baby, I had to try. The next day, I arrived at Carter's coffee shop 15 minutes early. My heart thumped hard. The familiar smell of coffee beans, which normally brought me comfort, now churned my stomach. I chose a table near the door, an easy escape route if needed. Emma was parked across the street, ready to assist if things went south. The bell above the door chimed exactly at 2. Mike walked in alone just as he'd promised. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, and wearing the same blue button-down shirt he'd had on the night of the incident. My body tensed as he approached, but he stopped a few feet from the table, respecting my space. Can I sit? He asked softly. I nodded, watching him sink into the chair across from me. His eyes went to my stomach, then darted away guiltily. I messed up, he said bluntly. Last night, she's staying at a hotel now. I wrapped my hands around my teacup, trying to process what he was saying. Just like that? No arguing, no yelling, no crying? She told me I was abandoning her, he said. That I was choosing. He swallowed hard. I can't even repeat what she called you. But I packed her things myself. Told her if she didn't leave, I'd call the police. A couple at the next table glanced at us and I lowered my voice. Why now, Mike? Why not before? After all the time she hurt me. Because I became her. His voice cracked. When I hit you, I became everything I hated about her. Controlling. Violent. Always ready to believe the worst. He wiped his eyes quickly, as if ashamed to be crying. The sound of your head hitting the wall. It keeps replaying in my mind. And then seeing that pregnancy test. He choked back a sob. The barista called out someone's order, and the sound made me jump. Mike noticed and winced at my reaction. I'm afraid of you, I admitted quietly. Do you understand that? I'm pregnant with your child and I'm afraid of you. You should be, he whispered. What I did is inexcusable. But Sarah, please believe me, it will never happen again. I'm starting therapy tomorrow. I already had my first consultation. He paused a moment before continuing. I need to understand why I let her control me. Why I became this person I don't even recognize. I took a deep breath, trembling slightly. I have conditions, Mike. No negotiations. He leaned forward intently. Anything. Janet never sets foot in our house again. No holidays, no visits, nothing. She gets no information about the baby. No pictures, no updates, nothing. Done, he said firmly. Continue with therapy, I added. And we do couples therapy. And if you ever raise your hand to me again, I'm gone. No arguments, no second chances. I will press charges and file for full custody. His fingers tightened into a fist. I understand, he said. He pulled out his phone and brought up an email. I already found a couples counselor. He slid a business card across the table. This is my lawyer. I asked her to draw up papers giving you full custody if I ever become violent again. One incident is all it would take. The documents are in process. My hand shook as I took the card. You're serious about this? I asked. I love you, Sarah, he said, looking down at his hands. I love our baby, and I hate myself for what I did. When I heard that heartbeat, I realized I was becoming the kind of father I never wanted to be. The kind of father who makes his child afraid. The silence between us was thick with unspoken fears. Finally, I broke it. I'm not coming home tonight, I said. I need time. And we start couples therapy. He nodded, relief visible on his face. Would it be okay if I came to the next doctor's appointment? For the first time since that horrific night, I felt a tiny spark of hope. Yes, I said. But Emma's coming too. Of course, he agreed quickly. Whatever you need to feel safe. As we sat there, the afternoon light streaming through the coffee shop windows, I realized we were at a crossroads. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with therapy sessions and rebuilding trust. But at least there was a road now. The next 2 weeks were a strange dance of careful boundaries and small steps forward. Mike attended his therapy sessions twice a week and sent me pictures of his check-ins at the therapist's office. Dr. Martinez, our counselor, helped us begin to rebuild, mostly through supervised sessions where we learned to communicate without Janet's toxic influence. But Janet wouldn't go away easily. Mike, your mother is outside my classroom again. I texted him one Tuesday morning. Through the window, I could see her, sitting in her silver Mercedes, staring at the school entrance. My third graders were at recess, but my hand shook as I typed. His response was immediate. Don't move. I'm calling the police. 15 minutes later, I watched through my classroom window as 2 police officers approached Janet's car. She played the perfect victim. Tears, trembling hands. Just a mother concerned about her son's marriage. But when they told her to leave, the mask dropped. She's poisoning my son against me, she shrieked, loud enough for me to hear through the closed windows. She trapped him with that baby. My classroom aide, Susan, placed a protective hand on my shoulder. I want this on film, she whispered. Could be useful for that restraining order you mentioned. I nodded, grateful for her quick thinking. That night, during our counseling session, Mike broke down when I showed him the video. I've never seen that before, he said, his voice hollow. That's really her. She acted exactly like that when Dad left. Screaming, making accusations, playing the victim. I looked at Dr. Martinez. I always believed her version of everything, Mike said. The generational pattern of abuse is strong, Dr. Martinez said gently. But Mike, you're breaking it. Every time you choose Sarah and your child over your mother's manipulation, you're breaking it. Later that week, we had another prenatal appointment. Emma drove me, with Mike following in his car. Another one of our new safety measures. The ultrasound technician pointed to the small shape of our baby on the screen. For the first time since the incident, Mike took my hand. I let him. Would you like to know the gender? The technician asked. Mike looked at me questioningly. I nodded. It's a girl, she smiled. A girl. My free hand went to my stomach protectively. Looking at Mike, I saw the same thought in his eyes. Our daughter would never know the pain of being afraid in her own home. That afternoon, as Emma and I were leaving the clinic, we found Janet waiting in the parking lot. Before I could react, Mike stepped between us. Leave now, or I'll call the police again, he said. I have a right to know about. Janet's voice rose hysterically. She must have been listening through the clinic walls. No, you don't, Mike said, his voice firm. You lost that right when you made me hurt her. Hurt her? I never made you do anything, she screamed. She's turning you against me, just like your father. He did you a favor by leaving, Mike retorted. Security's on their way, Emma interrupted, phone in hand. She'd already been instructed to call the police immediately. As security approached, Janet retreated to her car, but not before yelling. This isn't over. That's my grandchild. That night, back in Emma's guest room, I finally let myself break down. Mike sat on the floor outside my door. We weren't ready for him to stay over yet, but he refused to leave me alone after Janet's appearance. I filed for the restraining order, he said through the door. For all 3 of us. You, me, and the baby. My lawyer says with the video from the school and the clinic incident, we'll get it. I pressed my hand against the door. On the other side, I could hear him do the same. I'm sorry, he whispered. For everything I put you through. For every time I didn't protect you. For every time I chose her. I know you are, I said softly. But Mike, I need you to understand something. Anything. I'm not doing this for us. I'm doing this for her, I said, touching my growing belly. She deserves better than what we had. Yes, he replied. She does. And I swear to you, Sarah, she'll have it. We'll have it. We'll give her everything we never had. Safety. Trust. Unconditional love. For the first time in weeks, I believed him. The restraining order arrived a week later. 3 months, renewable depending on behavior. Seeing it in writing that Janet Matthews must maintain a distance of at least 500 feet made it real. We were doing this. Mike and I continued our individual therapy sessions twice a week, with Dr. Martinez for couples counseling. Slowly, painfully, we began to unravel years of manipulation and control. Tell me about the first time you noticed Janet's influence changing your behavior, Dr. Martinez asked Mike during one session. Mike rubbed his face, thinking. 2 months after our wedding, Sarah made this beautiful birthday dinner for me. But Mom had already surprised me with lunch. She knew about the dinner, Sarah had told me. When I got home, she started saying how worried she was that Sarah was wasting money on expensive ingredients when she'd already fed me. And what did you do? Dr. Martinez prompted. He looked at me, shame in his eyes. I complained. Like her. I remembered that night, dumping all the food, crying in the kitchen while Mike and Janet watched TV in the living room. Old patterns run deep, Dr. Martinez explained. But recognition is the first step to change. In my 5th month, we felt ready for me to move back home. Emma helped me pack. Are you sure about this? She asked, folding my maternity clothes. No, I admitted. But I need to try. For her, I said, touching my growing belly. The house felt different when I returned. Janet's things were gone. Her photos, her decorative plates, her passive-aggressive sticky notes about cleaning. Mike had repainted the walls in soft yellows and greens, colors we'd chosen together for the nursery. He got rid of the dining set, he'd said quietly. Bought a new one. Didn't want me having to look at that table every day. The new table was a warm, round oak, instead of Janet's formal mahogany. No hierarchy, no head of the table where she used to hold court. Instead, we developed new routines. Mike would text me before coming home, giving me time to prepare for his arrival. We cooked together instead of me handling all the meals. Every decision about the baby was made jointly, without any outside interference. The first test came at 7 months. Janet sent a baby gift to my school. An expensive silver rattle with a note that read, "Family heirlooms can't be kept away by restraining orders." Mike took it straight to our lawyer. "I know she's testing the boundaries," he said, "making sure we know she's still watching." The rattle was returned through legal channels with a warning about violating the restraining order. That night, Mike held me as I cried. "What if she never stops?" I whispered. "What if our daughter has to grow up looking over her shoulder? Then we'll protect her," he said firmly. "Every day. Every way. I won't fail her like I failed you." Dr. Martinez helped us make a safety plan. Passwords for daycare pickup, security cameras for the house, a list of protected contacts who could help in case of emergency. As my due date neared, we faced another challenge. Janet had somehow figured out which hospital I was registered at for the birth plan. "We have to switch hospitals," Mike said, showing me the message his mother had sent through his cousin. She was already trying to get information from the maternity ward. So we re-registered, using Emma's address, and made sure all the hospital staff knew about the restraining order. It felt extreme, but seeing Mike take these steps to protect us helped rebuild my trust in him. "You're doing the work," Dr. Martinez said in one of our final sessions before my due date. "Both of you. That's what matters." Looking around our reformed house, at the nursery we had built together, at the man Mike was without his mother's influence, I finally felt something I hadn't felt in months: hope. Labor started at 2 a.m. on a quiet Tuesday. Mike called Emma first, then we followed our practice plan. Hospital bag packed, car seat ready, security cameras checked. There was no sign of Janet's Mercedes anywhere near our house. The delivery room was calm, nothing like the chaos I had feared. Mike stayed by my side, holding my hand and whispering words of encouragement. Emma stood guard at the door, our self-appointed sentinel. After 12 hours of labor, our daughter Lily Grace arrived, screaming her lungs out. "She's perfect," Mike whispered, tears streaming down his face. "She looks just like you." As I held Lily for the first time, I studied her tiny features. My dark hair, Mike's nose, 10 perfect fingers and toes. She was everything we had fought for, everything I had protected. The first test came sooner than we expected. We received a flower delivery at the hospital addressed to my first granddaughter, Lily. Mike intercepted it before it reached our room. The card read, "Blood is thicker than water. She'll need her grandmother soon enough." Instead of hiding it, we faced it together. Now hospital security doubled their rounds. Emma's partner, Tom, a police officer, volunteered to stay outside our door during the night shift. We were surrounded by protection, by people who understood our need for safety. Home was different than I had imagined during my pregnancy. Mike had installed new security cameras, changed all the locks, and even added extra lighting around the house. But inside it was just us, our little family of 3. "Welcome home, Lily," I whispered, carrying her into the nursery we had created together. It felt like a sanctuary, painted in soft colors, filled with books and stuffed animals chosen by both of us. The first few weeks were a blur of middle-of-the-night feedings and diaper changes. Mike took an extended paternity leave, proving his commitment to being present for every moment. We developed our parenting style, free of Janet's critical voice. At Lily's first checkup, our pediatrician smiled at us. "She's thriving," he said. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." That night, as we sat in the nursery with Lily sleeping peacefully in her crib, Mike took my hand. "I saw Mom today," he said quietly. "She was at the grocery store buying more diapers." My heart stopped. "What happened?" I asked. "She tried to approach me, asked about Lily, and told me." He squeezed my hand. I walked away, called security, followed our plan. I let out the breath I'd been holding. "And how do you feel?" "Safe," he said. "Our daughter will never know that kind of love. The kind that suffocates. The kind that controls. She'll only know the real thing." Looking at our sleeping daughter, I knew he was right. The cycle had been broken. Our home was filled with a different kind of love now, one that protected instead of controlled, one that built instead of destroyed. Lily stirred in her sleep, making those little baby noises that melted our hearts. Mike and I sat there watching her, our hands still joined. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" I asked. "For giving me a second chance to show her what a real family looks like." I leaned against his shoulder, feeling truly safe for the first time in years. "We're doing this together," I said softly. "And we'll keep doing it every day. For her." Outside, the sun was setting on another day of our new life. A life we had fought for. A life we would continue to protect. A life where our daughter would grow up knowing only love and never fear. And that made every struggle, every tear, every difficult decision worth it.